What is up, guys? Welcome back to Meaning of Podcast, the podcast where we talk about your favorite directors and the deeper meaning within their films. We are back this year talking about our favorite directors of last year. This is our official video of the top 5 directors of 2020. When we did this video a couple years ago, RB3, we usually do it on our parameters, and our parameters are usually set around how we think a director kind of took over 2020. That's the term that we like to use. Took over the year, dominated the year, whether it's in conversation, whether it's in quality of film, whether it's a small film that got a lot of love, whether it's a big film that kicked ass. Those are kind of our parameters. It's not necessarily which one made the most money or which one gets more critical acclaim. It's the one that we feel that really took 2020 by the bullhorns and just rode that bull all the way. So either way, we're going to do our top 5 list. I want to ask you guys how you're feeling about this list.
I'm a little nervous. I'm getting deja vu to when we did this last year, and it was a lot of fun. And I feel like last year was really easy for me. We have a lot to choose from this year, and I already know that there's probably going to be somebody that you guys say that I left off my list, or someone in my honorable mentions who maybe in like a week I might actually put in my top 5. So I'm confident, and I still love my list. But it's been a really, really packed year of incredible direction, just all over the board.
How about you, RB3? How are you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited about this list. There's a lot of different directions I thought I could have potentially taken this list. Like, there's a version of this list where it could have just been all black people. There's a version of where it could have just been all black women. There's a version where it could have been, all women directors. There's a version where there's all kinds of ways I could have thought about this list and made it. But, I'm glad I found an honest way of expressing the people who I think making a big impact in 2020 and will make a big impact going forward in their directorial careers.
That's kind of the best way to sum it up, guys. Made a big impact on 2020 and will probably have a great future ahead of them. Yes, me too. I picked a list that is pretty weird, if I'm being honest, guys. I did it on purpose because I didn't want to pick the same ones you guys picked. So I tried to go a little bit kind of off balance. I picked a lot of pop movies, a lot of weird movies, a lot of other stuff that might be in there as well. Not necessarily the directors that did the best movies kind of thing, but I really tried to do big budget movies, small budget movies, movies that have different genres in it, stuff like that. And you will see that in my list. But as we always do, we are starting at number 5, and we are starting with the one and only Sabrina Ramirez. Sabrina, what is your number 5 of your top 5 directors of 2020?
All the pressure. My number 5 is actually Charlie Kaufman. Purely subjective. I totally understand if this is not everybody's cup of tea, but I'm thinking of Ending Things is one of my top films of this past year. I think it's the one that had like the most emotional impact and like emotional weight, besides a few others that I'll definitely be getting into in this list. But for this weird, emotionally distressing and deep film, and adapting a novel that is a completely different story almost. He made this his own, and that's something that I think is super, super interesting. And also, when you think about Charlie Kaufman, you don't really think about the films that he's directed. And of course, we have our Charlie Kaufman episode where we talk about all of that. I think this kind of cements him as somebody to watch, especially going forward in the future.
Yeah, that's a good choice. Was this his second feature film, right? I believe
Third.
This is his third? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, second live action film, though.
Yeah,
the animated one in between.
How do you feel like this one does in comparison to his other directed films, Sabrina?
I think this is the best one.
Yeah.
I think Synecdoche, New York and Anomalisa are both really special in their execution, but I think this one's the one that's still really weird and you do have to think about, and it's going to be incredibly divisive, but I think it's the most palatable so far. Still not very palatable, but I think most.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you think Kaufman, you don't think direction. So it's kind of interesting you went with this. What do you think of this choice, RB3?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Charlie Kaufman as well. I mean, I really love him. Thinking of Ending Things too. I personally prefer Synecdoche, New York to this one personally in terms of directorial efforts. With that being said, it was it's uncompromising for sure, and we love to see that from our directors, especially if it's something like a Netflix original. And I think we saw like a wide range of cool performances in this movie too, from Toni Collette to Jesse Plemons to of course the main star
Jessie Buckley.
Yeah, Jessie Buckley. So it was really, really fascinating and interesting. I think it's definitely a top tier directorial effort this year for sure.
Speaking of that, RB3, what is your number 5 director of 2020?
Well, my number 5 director of 2020 is actually something that I'm sure will be on your list, Andres, as well, and that is actually Andrew Peterson of The Vast of Night. I loved the direction I saw in The Vast of Night. To me, that's a movie that really exemplifies the beauty of direction, and when it comes to the way the camera moves, to how super, super low budget it was, to the fact that you could create this whole science fiction story that's built around this alien invasion without even actually needing to show the alien ship, or without even needing to have some sort of big visual effects. Like, it's all through visual and auditory communication. And I think for that's worthy of a claim for one of the best directors of 2020. It truly moved me the way when I first saw that film. And Andres, you really put me onto that, because I really hadn't heard of that movie until you told me about it. So I really enjoyed Andrew Peterson's work. Andrew Patterson's. I'm not sure if this is their directorial debut. I'm kind of looking right now. It is their directorial debut. So I actually do have a couple of directorial debuts on my list, it turns out. But this is one of them, and this is something that really truly moved me. So
this is my number 3, full disclosure. I think we can do this. We can jump around. Yes, this is my number 3. I think this defines, like you said, RB3, a directorial debut. It defines it because it is sci-fi in one of the most bold ways you can do it. It's such bold filmmaking in the sense of, I'm going to make a sci-fi movie about aliens all through dialogue and camera movement. That's it. And that's a pretty bold move to do, because that's not what makes sci-fi usually. But it's essentially all dialogue driven. It's story driven, right? Because it's a guy over the phone telling a creepy story of a sci-fi story. And then it's a creepy old lady telling another creepy story about a sci-fi story. And then that's kind of it. And then everything else is just the way the camera moves around the story and around the dialogue that kind of drives this film. And that's why, to me, it's such bold filmmaking, because I'm just like, when are we going to see this stuff? But we probably won't. And like you said, RB3, so low budget, yet it feels high budget with the camera. And the camera work is so high quality, to the point that I feel like they just spent all the money on the camera work and we're like YOLO on everything else. And I love the natural lighting of it all, because it's so like really well lit, in the sense of like you can barely see what's there, but it feels like that adds to the creepiness factor of it all. And I think this is one of the best directorial debuts, considering we had so many incredible directorial debuts this year. I don't know what you think of this one, Sabrina.
I love this one on the list. Actually, this is totally one that I forgot about. Everything you guys said, I echo all of that. I love the fact how he took hold of that low budget and he was able to work around it within this story. Completely worked for me. Even just like the cast, the performances that we got, a lot of these people are no names. I knew Sierra McCormick, the main character, from a Disney show back in the day. So it's just all different things like that. I feel like this film is so special. I'm a huge fan of the Twilight Zone, and I really got those Twilight Zone vibes from this. So I love that it's on both of your lists.
Yeah, I think this movie kicks ass, and I really do feel like 90% of it, or a lot of it, is with the direction, which is kind of the point of this list, is trying to pick directors that did that. All right, I guess it's my turn, right, for number 5. I gave my number 3 away because you took mine, RB3. So we're jumping around here, but I'll do my number 5. And my number 5 is already starting things off on a weird note. I went with Gina Prince Bythewood.
Yes.
From The Old Guard. This is a weird choice, because it is a big budget action movie, and I don't necessarily put a lot of big budget action movies on my list, but I feel like when it comes to having a first time action movie and this be your first action movie is so cool, because you really tell how much she gets from this movie and how much she gets from directing this film, throughout the action scenes, throughout the emotional scenes, throughout the characters, throughout the story and the background of the story that we get. Because this story is an original IP in the sense that we haven't seen this in film before. So she gets to play around with it. You know, how do we tell the story of these five immortals who are going around the world trying to stop wars and trying to save people, and how badass they are, essentially. And we've seen a lot of healing factor kind of superhero type stories. Wolverine is an example. We get a lot of vampires who have the healing factor. So we get to use that to the full extent of it, which I think is really cool, as far as like what happens when you empty a clip into one of these guys and they're still standing and they keep coming. I think the action stuff you can get from that is really interesting, and the way she chose to direct it, with the music choices, with the way the camera moves, with the performances she got from the actors, I think it's one of the best action movies of 2020, and it's one of my favorite action movies of the year. And it's one of those things where directing an action film is so underrated these days, because there's so many of them, that I think directing a quality action film is something that's really tough to do, and I think she nails it.
100%. I thought this was a really, really great choice. This is something I would have loved to see in a theater, and I'm excited because I've heard rumblings about Netflix actually greenlighting the sequel already, and I think this film perfectly stood on its own, but it definitely set up for like further like diving into kind of like the mythos around it and everything that it set up. It was really interesting, and also like this is like a major like comic book film. This is something, and it's she did such a great job working with this huge story and being like, I think I read an article that she was like one of the first Black women to ever direct a huge comic book film, and if that's the case, then she absolutely knocked it out of the park, and I can't wait to see what she does in the future. I mean, if they're gonna be adding really talented directors to the MCU the way they did with like Chloe Zhao or other people like that, I would love to see Gina Prince Bythewood.
Yeah, and I know at one point she was rumored to like be attached to like a Spider-Man property. At one point, to Silver and Black as well. I would have loved to have seen that get made. But yeah, the Ogre was dope. It was a really cool adaptation of the source material, and I didn't even know it was based on a source material. It just felt original. It just felt new, and it just felt different. And adding that in the age of like superhero movies, especially for something that we're seeing on the small screen, is very commendable. And I think it's really dope because even what we see on the small screen, even when we see it on the small screen, it doesn't feel like less spectacular or less big. It still feels like a dramatic, enthralling story that you could still be invested in the same way that you would be if you see like a Wonder Woman or something on screen as well. So I thought it was really, really dope in those ways too.
Yeah, that's why I chose it. Alrighty, that moves on to our number 4 on your list, Sabrina. What is your number 4 director of 2020?
My number 4 director is Eliza Hittman, who directed Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. I had to put this one on the list. I honestly wish it was higher, but there were so many to choose from. I think Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always was the most powerful film of the year. I think there's an honesty and there's a reality to it that's presented on screen that you really need a talented filmmaker who is in love with this project, who's in love with these characters, who has an important story to tell. And that was Eliza Hittman with this one, because that titular scene is my favorite scene of 2020. The never, rarely, sometimes, always moment that we get. I just think the way she directed these young actresses, Sydney Flanagan, like that's one of the best performances of this past year. And a lot of, you know, when we talk about actors and we talk about the performances they give, they need a talented director to get them to this point. And for someone as young as Sydney Flanagan to kind of knock out a lot of veteran actors this year in terms of performance, it's something unique and it's something special. And if I could sit everybody down and be like, you have to watch one movie that came out over this past year, it would be Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always.
Yeah, honestly, this is my honorable mention. On my honorable mention, I was gonna include it, but the reason why I didn't, Sabrina, is because I knew you were going to, and I really
Yeah.
wanted to try and have variety on our list and not just have the same choices, because I think that's a better uh, viewing experience, a better listening experience. But I really do feel like Eliza Hittman deserves to be on any list when it comes to top five directors of 2020 or top five films of 2020, to be frank, because I do feel like you said it is one of the most powerful films of the year. And that scene is one of the best films of the year. And Sidney Flanigan is one of the best performances of the year. And all that adds up to an incredible performance behind the camera from Eliza Hittman directing this film and really controlling all the emotions and focusing on kind of the quiet storm that is going inside the character of Sidney Flanigan, and the quiet issues that she's going through and how she's digesting them internally. And we could see that on film, and that's really tough to do, especially for a young director like Eliza. And I think she kills it behind the camera as well. Any thoughts, RB3?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think she totally kills it when it comes to channeling the emotion of the situation, right? And it's not something that's like exploitative. It's not something that's like overly like dramatic or over the top, or that adds conflict in places that it doesn't need to be added. It just focuses narrowly, like on, not narrowly, but it takes these issues and doesn't like make it it doesn't paint it in some sort of way. It just makes it human and relatable and understandable for people of all genders. And I really appreciate that. I really think, like you said, the performances that were directed from Miss Flanagan was, yes,
Eliza
Sidney
Hittman is a
Flanagan.
director,
yes,
and then
yes.
Sidney Flanigan's
Sidney
the actress.
Flanagan, yeah. So it was just amazing overall. I really loved. Never, rarely, sometimes, always, and you're right. It's also my honorable mentions too. I would have also mentioned it, but I too knew Sabrina was going to mention it too. So
Yes. Your number four, RB3.
my number four. So sticking on the trend of women directors. Again, I mentioned before, I think I could have made a whole list, particularly of just Black women directors too, right? And people, especially when we see a year of directors like Regina King and like Andres Pick, Gina Prince Bythewood, and also Tiana. I'm sorry, Tiara Rishia Paris, and who directed Salid in the Spades, and also Channing Godfrey Peoples, who directed Miss Juneteenth. Like all really great directors coming out this year who were Black women. But for me personally, I'm actually gonna represent somebody who hasn't been in a lot of like conversation lately, and it's actually a later pick for me because I've been trying to catch up and watch like a lot of movies for like the best of the year list, and this director directed one of the many black and white Netflix movies that came out this year between Mank and Malcolm and Marie, and that's the director of the 40-year-old version, Rahad Blank. Now, the 40-year-old version, if y'all haven't heard of this movie, it's actually it's actually written and directed and starring like herself, like so she's playing like a version of herself as like an aspiring playwright in like New York City. But then things are not going well. It's not necessarily hitting right. So she actually turns to a career in rapping. And it's actually like a really funny and creative and like wildly like spiritual kind of movie in a lot of ways. So I really ended up digging it. This is also a directorial debut. This is something that I have been getting it recommended on my Netflix feed for a minute, but I hadn't really checked it out. But again, like I've been trying to like power through a bunch of movies recently. And this is something that I just discovered like literally like a couple nights ago. And I thought it was, it's funny. It ends on a not so like, it ends on a little bit of like a not so satisfying note per se, or I think it does, but it depends on how you read these kinds of movies. But I think having something that represents older, femininity and still aspiring and chasing your dreams even at an older age is something that a lot of people can aspire to do. And I just think that is dope that it's in black and white, and it's it's mostly shot in New York, so it has that real like urban, like raw, like decayed feel, and having like that writer, director, and actor kind of like feel to it too. I think it's just really, really cool and special. So I want to
That
shout
sounds
out.
really, really interesting. I've actually never heard of that, but I don't know Radha Blank's like life. But I mean, if the story is kind of like it's loosely based on her and it's like a playwright, whatever, this kind of sounds like it's one of those like moments that we've got over the past year where it's like a film that feels very so much like a play or even is based off of a play. So that's something I'm definitely gonna be checking out. It's a great choice.
Yeah, I'm also going to be checking that out because I haven't heard of it as well. It's really interesting how many films Netflix has that we just haven't heard about. It's kind of remarkable how we always go throughout the year and we're just like, hey, what a weird year in movies, right? And then we go back and we're like, oh crap, look at all the movies I missed.
Yeah. Well, people should hear about this movie and people should hear about this director because she actually ended up winning the Sundance Award for Best Director.
Oh, no way.
When this film came out and debuted at Sundance, and also the film overall won the Vanguard Award, which is like the Audience Choice Award at Sundance as well. So very, very big on the festival we're on, and it got mentioned on like 2 top 10 lists, including like the National Review Best of Year list. But it hasn't really gotten that much recognition. So I just wanted to shout it out.
Of course, that's a great way to get these kind of movies more love. All right, that moves on to my number 4, right? Wow, it's weird. Every time I go to me, I'm just like, what? I made a list? I did make a list. My number 4 is another weird one, but again, this is kind of my theme. I'm trying to do things that is kind of against the grain and different. I went with the thing that kind of took over 2020, at least in my circle, and that's The Last Dance. Jason Heher, I'm probably mispronouncing his name, directed one of the most viewed documentaries of all time. One of the most viewed documentaries, one of the most gripping documentaries, and one of the most, I think, important documentaries of this last 20 years. I really do feel like the story of Michael Jordan is something that just goes over everyone's head because it's a name that's synonymous with brands now, and I feel like the way we view brands is like, okay, sure, Jordan brand, that's cool, or basketball, that's cool, but Jordan is more than basketball. Jordan has always been more than basketball, and when you see this documentary, you know what I'm talking about. And the fact that it is, an 8-episode long series and at the same time an 8-hour long movie, because it's all pretty much just one film, is really, really well done. And the way you can put this on a channel like ESPN, which is something that is pretty much attached to any kind of cable platform or low quality cable, is really cool because you can get more audiences that way. This isn't on a premium network. This isn't on Stars or HBO. This is on ESPN. Like, you can watch this if you have ESPN, which most people have. And I think that's really important. And to me, this is just a powerful documentary, a crazy documentary about one guy who's addicted to becoming the greatest of all time and accomplishing that addiction and really kind of questioning if that's a good thing or a bad thing. What do you think, RB3? I know you have thoughts.
Yeah, no, 100%. And not only just going back to, you said accessibility, not just being on ESPN, but also coming to Netflix right after that too. It's
That's
also
right.
very streamable on Netflix co-production. But yeah, I think, I mean, obviously, you know how I feel about this. This is actually my favorite, like, piece of content, like, this entire year, like, not even on movies or whatever. It's just, like, my favorite thing. Because I just think, for one, like you said, the direction is absolutely phenomenal with it, right? Like, and I think they found a way to do the sports documentary in a way that, like, it's familiar, but it isn't, right? Like, they did a lot of really interesting things that I feel are actually very director specific, right? And especially when it's like coming to him looking at the iPad or the other clips of what people had to say about him. Like, I think I've never really seen a documentary like really do that.
Never.
Before. Yeah.
Never. When have you ever seen a documentary become a meme, bro?
Yeah. Multiple
wild.
memes. Yeah. And also the fact that you're taking a whole year, over 200 hours of footage, an entire NBA season that was recorded and just sitting on the shelf for 20 plus years, and getting that footage back out and repurposing it into this 10-hour documentary series. Like, that's incredible too. Like, I always give a lot of credit to whenever directors have to take like that much footage and just bring it down into like a sizable matter, and then still tell a story on top of that. So, and also like, and I'm not trying to harp on this, on the greatness of this for too long, but also like the timeline, like the way it tells the story in these timelines, right? Like it doesn't tell it like in a linear way. It does like the flash forward and the flashbacks. Like it's just something that we never really seen before. And I think it's dope that even though they had to finish it like during the pandemic, like they literally finished the last 2 episodes like during quarantine or whatever. I just think you could just see like the quality and the care that they had towards making the series. So I just really, really loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know about your guys' love for it. I unfortunately haven't checked it out yet. I really do want to. There's still so many things to catch up for 2020, and I'm focusing on movies right now. But I think because it's only like a few episodes, so hopefully once I knock all that out, I can finally check it out. Because you guys have been raving about it for so long.
Yeah, I mean, it really is worth it if I'm being honest. And it's one of those things too where I feel like a lot of documentarians, a lot of documentary filmmakers don't get the kind of love that they should get. And when you broke the internet and when you broke TV sets, you should get some love. Like, my God, bro, like if you get that many viewers watching this thing, it should get a mention for filmmakers like Jason, creating this kind of movie and getting inside the brain of a guy who is known to be one of the most private guys on the planet, one of the craziest guys on the planet too, Michael Jordan, and getting him to cry.
Get him to cry. Who would have saw that coming? Yeah.
Getting him to get emotional about why are you so mean, Mike? Why are you so mean, Mike? And he's like, I am mean, bro, but I had to be. But it's real, bro. You felt it because it's one of those things where I just I just watched the Tiger Woods documentary, and it goes to show you how the kind of people that to become the greatest athlete, you have to lose a little bit of yourself. And to become the greatest of all time, you have to lose a lot of yourself. Like, you will lose yourself in some sort of way. And you see that with Michael Jordan as well. And after that, it's one of those things where it's introducing the whole GOAT concept, which I think is a word that always gets tossed out. But people don't remember that GOAT started with Michael, bro. He's the one who created that word. Greatest of all time is GOAT because of Michael Jordan. And I really do feel like he is the greatest of all time, especially after watching that, because you're just like, damn, 6 championships in a row. Whew, that's like impossible nowadays, man. Like even with super teams, even with James Harden's and Kevin Durant's and like all these like athletes put together on one giant, like even now you can't do that because it's just too much. It's way too much.
And the fact that he won, I didn't know. See, that's the thing. I didn't even know a lot of this stuff about him before. I didn't even know he won like MVP and like Rookie of the Year and like all this other stupid stuff. Like he literally won every single award you could win, even before even touching the championship. Like it's just kind of crazy. I don't know.
Scoring titles too. Like it's wild.
Yeah.
That moves on to your number 3, Sabrina, and then we'll do RB3's number 3, and then we'll go to break because I already said my number 3. So your number 3, Sabrina.
Yeah, sounds good. My number 3 is Sam Levinson. So he is the creator of Euphoria. And the reason why this past year he has come out with 2 special episodes. He came out with part 1, which is Rue, and part 2 for Jules. And I mean, he's showing these characters like in ways that we haven't seen them before. He introduces new ideas because obviously, even if you're not into the show Euphoria, if it's not your cup of tea, I completely understand. This is something completely separate because they did film this during quarantine. So we have, for Zendaya's episode, we have her in a diner talking to her sober mentor, someone she looks up to, and they're just having a real, open, honest conversation about addiction. They're talking about the good. They're talking about the bad of life. They're highlighting and covering all these different topics, how their addictions affected their family, and how seeking help has mended relationships or other relationships have been broken. It's just something very, very special. And then the next episode, we have Jules, and that basically highlights, that idea of identity, because we're talking about a young trans woman, and we're talking about through this entire process of getting to know her sexuality, opening up to different people, how it changes the way that she views herself and how she kind of goes back and forth, thinking about societal like standards and, what is femininity? What is masculinity? How do you balance both these things and find your own path within what society kind of thinks something should be? And I think And for her episode, it's her sitting down in a therapist's office. And the way they tell these stories, we have Sam Levinson with his direction. He's going to different moments. He's showing dreams as she's talking to her therapist. She's like, I had this dream about moving to New York City. And we get that glimpse of that. I think these are two of the most beautiful episodes of like television I've seen over the past year. And they both recently just came out. And also, as introspective and special as that is, another one that I had to do it for, Malcolm and Marie. Malcolm and Marie was so interesting. I think it was so bold. I don't want to give like a full review because I know we'll definitely be coming out with that soon. But I think taking a script that Sam wrote in like 2 weeks, having Zendaya do her own hair, makeup, wardrobe, all of that stuff, and have John David Washington, the way he has these two actors interact, such like heavy dialogue, it gets dark, it's surprisingly funny, and it's super critical of just art and criticism in general. So I know this is going to be, it is already really divisive, but it's going to be probably more talked about once it actually comes out on Netflix. But I just thought it was really bold and super, super entertaining.
Thoughts, RB3?
Yeah, no, I'm a huge like Sam Livingston fan. I've said multiple times how much of a huge Euphoria fan I am, and how much of especially the first season, especially of the fourth episode too, which I believe he directed as well, which is the one that explored like Jules's kind of beginning, and like it had that like really excellent like opening sequence with not excellent, but like exploring like Jules becoming like discovering like her identity. And then I felt this episode, the second episode, which just came out last week, so this one it's a little more fresh in my mind, but this one was really moving because it dealt with the idea of like codependency too, right? Like having a significant other who depends on you so much that is just dragging down all these other aspects of your life. You end up learning so much more about Jules and the relationship with her father and her like alcoholic mother and like all these things and I love that it takes you through the story of Euphoria season 1 through Jules' perspective, because it's all through Bruce's perspective, so you're mostly following Zendaya's perspective, but now it takes you back through those moments like just through Jules' perspective, and I think that's just really, really dope. I like it filling in those gaps and adding those pieces to the story. And even with Rue's episode herself, that was just absolutely beautiful too. Again, I've talked about how One Night in Miami reminded me of My Dinner with Andre that we talked about, but that episode of Euphoria also felt like that too. Just two people just having that conversation, and they actually filmed it on 35 millimeter film, so it had that like extra like kind of feeling too. And I also commend Sam Livingston for that too, because out of the Jules episode, the Rue episode, and Malcolm and Marie, these are three movies or TV shows that are all essentially just two people talking to each other like the entire time. Like these are like the ideal quarantine kind of stories, right? Just a conversation between two people, and yet he still finds ways to make it compelling and interesting and funny. So I really, really dig Sam Livingston too, and I would have put him on my list. That's probably an honorable mention for me too, but that's a really, really dope pick for sure.
I also want to give a quick shout out because Hunter Schafer, the actress who actually plays Jules, is the one that wrote the script for the episode. So that's why co-wrote it. And that's that's just so interesting because she kind of talked about it in an interview that she worked with Sam on that, and she wrote like the first draft of it when she was going through a lot. So I think that's why we get all this like raw emotion and authenticity to it.
Yeah, and it's beautiful. If you watch like it on HBO Max, they give you like a little behind the scenes documentary, and they talk about it too. And that's also what I loved about the Jules episode too, because the Rue episode felt a little bit more like just a two conversation, like in this restaurant, this diner, you don't really leave. But this episode felt better because it had like dream sequences, nightmare sequences, flashbacks, flash forwards, like had all these really cool elements that felt more moving and cinematic to me.
And adding that idea with her mother and what she experiences with that, and something that's how we didn't see that in the first season because she hasn't told Rue. And since we have Rue narrating the first season, she didn't mention that. And then we have the parallel between her mother's alcoholism and then kind of her relationship with that versus like hers with Rue, and how she won't tell Rue about her mom and she can't tell her about a piece of herself because she's nervous. She thinks that she's going to feel the same way about Rue as she does her mom. And I don't know, all those ideas, it's so interesting. Even when we have that opening, and this is where they got me immediately, where I was like, all right, I'm in. It's just on Hunter Schafer's eyes, and then you have like you see their Ruse and Jules' entire relationship on her eyes, and it plays Liability by Lorde, and it plays the entire song. I was just like, all right, one of my favorite songs of all time, one of my favorite albums of all time, and just a beautiful shot that's telling us so much.
Yeah, obviously I want to check it out. I've been meaning to check it out. There's so much on my list. It's kind of insane, but yeah, it sounds incredible. That's a great choice. RB3, you're number 3.
Well, my number 3, going off of your documentary pick, Andres, where you picked the document. Which documentary did you pick again?
Last Dance.
Last Dance, absolutely. This is very different than Last Dance, I must say. This is another last second option that I'm picking up here too. Prepping for our best of the year list, and while there's a lot of great documentaries, including another black and white film called Time that I saw recently. That's a great documentary on Amazon Prime about prison and incarceration and all that. This documentary that I'm highlighting today is Boy State, and that's from the directors Jess Ross and Amanda McBine. Now I don't know if y'all seen Boy State or if y'all heard of Boy State.
I told you about it, bro.
You did tell me about Boy State. That's right. Some other people told me about Boy State too, but man, that movie is incredible. I just saw it and it's like absolutely mind blowing. The idea, if you don't know about this movie, it's the idea of having there's like every state has like this camp where they invite 1,100 17-year-old boys and make them stay for a week and have them organize their own government and elect their own like politicians, their own state congress people, their own governor, their own mayors of their own towns. And it's insane. And they do it, they have a boy state and they also have a girl state. And I would really, really, really love to see a girl state, by the way, too. I would really love to see that. But this boy state one, especially making this one set in Texas, you just see the forest of right like ideologies just exuded by like these 17-year-olds, especially when it's in fact that it's called Boy State, and the most active thing they're debating throughout the entire thing is like abortion. Is absolutely nuts. It's insane. So like for one, it's really difficult to make political documentaries that don't lean in like a one direction or another. And I felt like Boy State did a really good job of like not particularly leaning towards a particular side. They did definitely portray, because they show basically two sides running against each other. They show like the progressive more candidate with the Stephen Gomez. I'm making the same mistake that the dude made in the movie. They have the Stephen guy running as the progressive, and they have the other guy who's like Eddie, who's like the Ben Shapiro lookalike, running as like the super far right guy on the other side. And you just follow that whole story building up, and I literally felt like I was literally invested like myself. Like I was like, come on, Steven, come on, you can do it, you got it. Like I was literally just holding my breath. And so much so that the exact moment this movie ended, I went to all of the people who I liked in this movie and just followed them. Because I felt like this is the first time I actually saw a political documentary, because a lot of times political documentaries are about the past or conspiracy theories, or they're about the present and like the doom and gloom of the present. But this is the first time I actually saw a political documentary that got me thinking about the future and got me thinking about what's going to happen next and what's going forward. And is it scary seeing like how crazy a lot of these boys were? Absolutely. But it did give me hope and assurance that there was one kid who rose up pretty far to the top with the aid of a lot of other kids in that boys States thing too, that helped them along with it, actually rise to the top and get and become a popular figure in that thing. So I really, really dug it. I really enjoyed it. And I for a political junkie like me, like it just really felt like a good mixture of cinema and politics while being compelling too. So
it really is an example of one everyone says, and I've always said this because I really do feel this, and I think, a lot of people might be against me, but when everyone is like, yo, this new generation, they're all great, they're all progressive, and I'm like, nope, that's not true. Go watch this documentary. Like 900 out of the 1,000 boys are all hard right, because that's the way they're raised, and that's what they believe, and they're all one mind, one perspective, one point of view. And like you said, RB3, when you get the goofy Mexican kid coming in and being like, yo, what up, guys? Let's do something different, man. It doesn't all have to be right. And when a lot of them start to get behind him, you start to kind of cheer for him, where he's kind of converting a lot of like hardcore Republican right-wingers to his side. And I think it's hysterical because it reminded me of like the old school mentality of politics, right? Where it's like, if I have a good enough platform and a good enough personality, I can get Republicans and Democrats on my side. And he's able to pull a crap ton of right-wingers and Republicans on his side. And it's pretty remarkable if you think about it. But at the same time, most of it, in my opinion, is still pretty much like, hey, here's a bunch of 17-year-olds like basically worshiping Trump and, you know, talking about stuff that they shouldn't be talking about.
But I really want to see the Girl State. Like, I really want them to do the Girl State documentary. And I really want to see what's going on that side. Like,
I've heard of Boys State, but I didn't know what it was about. And I never heard of the fact that this is real. That in every single state that they do this. I had absolutely no idea.
They show past
real
candidates.
Politicians, like Cory Booker,
Clinton,
Bill Clinton, Dick Cheney, George Bush, literally big time like real politicians all went through this thing. Like,
it's basically like boot camp for wannabe politicians. It's really interesting, but obviously, you know, everyone should check it out. Either way, guys, that is our list for now. We're going to go to break real quick. When we come back, we're going to go with our top 2 directors of 2020, so make sure you guys stick around.
This ain't funny, so don't you dare laugh. With the 4/5 divide you in half. You getting at me equals a bloodbath. You do the math, take you out the equation. This ain't funny, so don't.
What's going on, First Cut fam? Paul Uyama here. I'll essentially be operating as First Cut's Sundance correspondent this year. Just wanted to give you a little heads up on some films to keep on your radar as the weekend goes on. One is Prisoners of the Ghostland. This is a post-apocalyptic genre movie from beloved Japanese auteur Sion Sono. Nicolas Cage stars in this. It might not be a similar movie, but it kind of gives me the same energy as Mandy from a couple of years ago. The next one is Passing. This is Rebecca Hall's directorial debut. It's an adaptation of Nella Larsen's novel, and it explores things like gender, sexuality, and class in the 1920s. Stars Tessa Thompson and Ruth Negga. Sounds really interesting to me. Summer of Soul, or When the Revolution Could Not Be Televised. This is legendary musician Questlove's directorial debut about the Harlem Cultural Festival, which took place concurrent with Woodstock in summer of '69. A lot of this is new footage. People like Stevie Wonder, Herbie Mann. On the Count of Three, this is Gerard Carmichael's directorial debut, starring him and Christopher Abbott about 2 friends who make a pact to end their lives at the end of their day. Early buzz has this compared to something like the Safdie brothers, so that sounds fascinating. I think keep an eye out for that one. And then Cusp, which is this documentary about 3 teenage girls in Texas. A lot of early buzz has this kind of compared to Minding the Gap. It seems like it's, you know, this big linchpin year in their lives. So I think all of those are really ones to keep an eye on as Sundance goes on this year. And if you want to keep track of everything that's coming out, just look up my name on Letterboxd. I'll be logging all the stuff that I want.
Y'all, Andres here.
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's RB3.
Sabrina here to talk about First Cut's Patreon. Yes.
That's right. Now you get to be a part of the First Cut community, as well as support us individually, RB3, Sabrina, and I, and get access to exclusive content all at the same time.
First Cut really began with the meaning of podcast. That started with myself and Andres Cabrera way back in 2017.
A little over a year ago, they added me on, and what we really do is just champion diverse voices behind the scenes, in front of the camera.
Since we started our YouTube channel, First Cut to House Our Podcast, and we've been growing ever since.
This time last year, we crossed over 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, and now we're just a few hundred away from hitting 4K.
With access to more monetary resources, we're able to hire another editor, we're able to hire more help, and we're just able to promote the show better in general.
So let's run down exactly what you would get on the First Cut Patreon.
You get access to the First Cut Discord server, and we're really excited to be able to have another platform to engage with you guys, to talk about whatever. We're gonna have so many different channels
Now our next tier is going to be our colorist.
Video essays are a promise that we made at the very beginning of First Cut that we never really had the opportunity to live up to until today.
And the next tier is visual effects.
Now, we've always wanted to do movie commentaries here at First Cut, and we finally have the opportunity to do it.
Up next is our sound editor category.
And this tier includes everything from the previous tiers, but also a monthly Patreon exclusive live stream. And the next tier is the post-production supervisor.
We are making this tier our access point for our behind the scenes content.
Next up, we have our composer. You get to be in a virtual hangout with RB3, Sabrina, and I. That means you officially get to hang out with us.
And then, of course, we have the final tier, which is the director.
You could be a part of the First Cut crew occasionally on this tier, where you can actually be a part of some of our episodes. If there's something that you're really, really, really passionate about that you want to talk about with us on the Meaning of Podcast, this is the tier that you want to be at.
We are starting Patreon so we can expand and produce more content for you guys to enjoy.
I'm super, super excited to see what 2021 has in store for us, which is why this First Cut Patreon is coming. And whatever way you can support, please do. Again, it's patreon.com/firstcutstudios. Check out our new website on geeksofcolor.co/first-cut to check out our reviews, our videos, and articles that pertain to everything First Cut related. Check it out.
Come along, children. Now we're going to have a little music.
What is up, guys? We are back talking about our top 5 directors of 2020. Now we've gotten to our top 2, which means Sabrina, who is your number 2?
So you guys know I had to do this. I think a lot of people are going to have this person at the top of their list for this year. And so I have Chloe Zhao. Chloe Zhao for Nomadland. So this is the first Chloe Zhao film that I've ever seen. And I think this was such a poetic, beautiful character study. It's talking about these group of nomads, and it's real. Like, people live in their vans, they travel, they live off like the land, they live on different retreats. It's just really interesting to get this glimpse into a world that I am so unfamiliar with, especially because obviously with our main character played by Frances McDormand in an incredible performance. By the way, with our main character, her husband had passed away. She was working in a certain place, like the recession hit, and this is kind of highlighting that idea of like the downtrodden. And it's fascinating because I think, like we said, a great director pulls great performances from everybody that's in front of the camera. And they mix real life people, real life nomads in with like Frances McDormand. So I think it almost like plays like a documentary in that way, where it just, the authentic nature of the execution is kind of what I think makes this work so much and makes us invested. It's really interesting to hear these monologues from the other characters, and you have to like wonder, like, is this real? Like, did this person have this kind of experience themselves? Or are they just pulling a great performance? It's like, it's interesting to kind of have that conversation and think about that. But yeah, I mean, highlighting something like this that I think is so interesting and so unique and so special, especially when we're talking about like the heartbreak behind it. Some people are forced into something like this. Some people choose it for themselves. I think the highlight, I don't want to give too much away, but the highlight was one of the characters who was actually sick the whole time. And it's just like, so incredibly earth-shattering and heartbreaking and beautiful at the same time. I was getting like Terrence Malick type of vibes with a lot of moments in this film. And I just think Chloe Zhao is a director to look out for, especially for the future. I'm going to catch up on the rest of her films. But also, something I found to be very interesting is that the original release date for Eternals was actually supposed to be 2020. So we would have gotten also another film from her in this time period. And so I'm excited to see, whenever that ends up getting released, I'm excited to see the way that shapes up.
Yeah. I haven't seen Nomadland, so RB3, if you have any thoughts.
Well, yeah, I mean, speaking of you having Chloe Zhao as your number 2, Chloe Zhao was actually my number 2.
Oh, there you go.
For my best of directors list. Yeah, you pretty much said like word for word, literally everything I was gonna say, Sabrina. Beautifully, like this film, beautifully evokes like naturalism and like you said, the mixture of like documentary and fiction. It kind of like blurs that line a little bit. For me personally, it really got me thinking about like the idea of like meta realism, right? Like how I talk a lot about how there's like waves of cinema, like, you know, modernism, postmodernism, and how in this era we're kind of like in a meta-modernism era. I feel like this is an example of like meta-realism, where it's like it takes a real thing, like, you know, it really puts Frances McDormand as a real nomad, but then you're just documenting it from like a fictionalized perspective of some actors in there. And like you said, all the performances are great. You can't even tell who was a real actor, who was not a real actor, because it just all felt very real and authentic. And like you said too, the scenery was beautiful, very Terrence Malick-esque, like very nature-y-esque. It literally caused me to like look for her like other films as well, to try and find, because it just like I love seeing like that kind of wide landscaping approach that like appreciates and soaks in the beauty of nature. I feel like that's what makes like cinema very unique. And also, I think it's dope that she also edits her own films too. Like, you know, there's not a lot of directors who do that. And you can really tell like there's real care and precision to what we see all throughout Nomad's Land. And that's absolutely one of my top favorites of the year. And it was really a truly transcendent experience when I watched it. So I really dug it.
I really want to see it for sure. And obviously, Chloe Zhao has got a lot of love in the past. I know she did a movie called The Rider. That got a lot of attention for sure. It sounds a lot. I haven't seen this movie, guys, obviously, but it sounds a lot like the Florida Project, as far as like getting a kind of actor who kind of blends into the world, and who feels like that is a part of that community, and making it feel very natural with that. So I'm excited to check that out. RB3, what's your number 2?
That's my number 2. Chloe's out.
That is your number 2. You just said that. I guess it goes to my number 2. My number 2 is probably the most obvious choice you guys can possibly imagine. You guys know I was going to do it, but I had to do it because I really do feel like it was that good and no one else talked about it. And I really do feel when it comes to direction, filmmaking is the music, the score, the combination of the visuals, the acting, the performances you got. Alex Garland is my number 2 because I really do feel like Devs is a film. It is a super long film, but it's a film that he wanted to direct. And that FX was like, yeah, we'll give you the budget, make it a miniseries, make it one story, and make it like range from the idea of technology and the power of technology and the danger of that, the idea of technological companies and how much power they have and how they can be like egomaniacs or psychos, and they have this much power and control over crazy amount of technological advancement. Set it in the city of San Francisco, which is one of the most expensive cities in the world and is one of the most heavy technologically advanced cities as far as Silicon Valley, as far as we get from video game companies, as far as what we get from Google, which I think this movie is essentially pointing towards Google. And at the same time, have the conflicted of Russia, America, China, and those 3 superpowers that are actually fighting over this technology. This is real technology. Obviously not the whole, simulated world, but the supercomputer is a real thing. And the one who's winning right now is China, funny enough, in real life. I've been keeping up with it. But that kind of real world stuff inside this sci-fi craziness of it all is really, really, really cool and really well done. So that's why Alex Garland is my obvious number 2.
I actually had Alex Garland on my list, and then I switched him out with Charlie Kaufman. I kind of figured he was going to be on your list, but he is in my honorable mentions for Devs. I just think Alex Garland, we did our The Meaning Of episode early on in quarantine about him. That was one of my favorite episodes that we ever did because we only had a few to talk about, and then we talked about Devs on a separate occasion. But I just think he is an incredible science fiction director. Like, he's able to take these stories, like you said, where not everything is 100% realistic, but since it's also grounded in reality, it like feels that way. And I don't know, it's just so interesting what he did with Ex Machina, Annihilation, and then now this one. Devs was incredible.
RB3.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, Alex Garland is definitely an honorable mention for me as well. I didn't really love not Annihilation, the one that we talked about with Oscar Isaac and
Ex Machina.
Oh,
Ex Machina. Yeah, I didn't love Ex Machina like all that much. I did enjoy Annihilation a lot more. But I did feel like Devs was like by far his best directorial effort And I felt like it gave a lot of time to like flesh out the story. And I think it blended a lot of genres. Like it's almost like a foreign espionage thriller mixed with, you know, some heavy drama, heavy technological drama. There's some times where it feels like an action movie almost. So you really get a lot of layers to the story. And I just loved all the performances. Nick Offerman in this, playing like this, like, you know, Silicon Valley oligarch kind of figure, really pulled it off, like both with like softness and sensitivity, but also like that, like pure like evilness and unseedy, like unsettlingness you could kind of see under his eyes too. It just all felt really, really, really special. So I really appreciate Devs as well.
And obviously you said Offerman did that performance, which is true, but also Sunya Mizuna,
Yes.
who killed it in her role. Her first big major role. Obviously, she's been in a lot of Alex Garland stuff. She was also in Crazy Rich Asians. But I really do feel like she killed this specific role, which required a lot of her. And someone who is a former dancer who just jumped into acting, I think she absolutely killed it in this performance.
Yeah. And people want to read my review for Devs on Geeks of Color, be sure to check that out. It's in the description down below.
And we also have a spoiler thing too on our First Cut channel.
That's right. Yeah. We do have a whole spoiler in-depth discussion and our meeting of Alex Garland. So it's all there. What's up?
Yeah, it's crazy because looking back at my spoiler thing, I stand by everything I said because I really do feel like there was some crazy religious overtones that he was hitting in Devs that I think no one else wanted to discuss. So I was like, F it, I'll do it just because I caught it. And I was like, yo, this is much religious overtones that I have to touch on it. But it really is fascinating too when you think of like end of the world, beginning of the world, God level type stuff, when you start to realize like when your concept of God starts to grow and grow and grow and grow, and you start to realize how much you can get from this technological advancement. And that's why the character of Nick Offerman starts to almost, you know, elevate himself to a God level where he does feel like he is God, like a lot of these companies actually do act. So that's why I thought it was pretty relevant. That's my number 2. Either way, we're finally at our number 1. Sabrina, what is your number 1 director of 2020?
Well, should we do honorable mentions first before you?
Yeah. Sorry. See, RB3, look at you, bro. You took the wheel from my hand and
Nah, my bad.
I
didn't mean to take any wheel from anybody's hand. My bad. Jesus, take the wheel. No. I'm kidding.
Take him.
Any honorable mentions from you guys?
Oh yeah, I have a bunch. I'll just kind of list them off. But Emerald Fennell for Promising Young Woman, Regina King, Spike Lee, of course. Spike Lee, it absolutely broke my heart to get this list. And then also one more, George C. Wolfe for Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which I don't think people talk about enough.
Yeah, I'll echo real quick. Regina King is definitely in my honorable mentions as well. And as well as you said, her name is Emerald
Fennell.
Emerald Fennell, who plays Camilla in The Crown. I still can't get over it, guys. I'm sorry, as a Crown stan that I am. She plays Camilla in The Crown. And she's a writer and a director. And she's just so talented. Shout out to her for Promising Young Woman.
Yeah. I mean, also, I guess I'm also giving Regina King a shout out for honorable mention too.
I thought you guys were gonna include her, so that's why
I thought y'all were gonna include her too.
Waited. Yeah, I waited for y'all.
Sorry about that. My bad. Shout out to Regina King. Shout out to David Fincher. Mank, even though Mank wasn't the greatest ever, I still really enjoyed it. Charlie Kaufman is also an honorable mention. Christopher Nolan for Tenet.
Christopher Nolan.
Yeah. Because that's some directing right there.
You
can't deny that's not. If you don't even like Tenet, that's some directing that's going on in there.
Oh, yeah.
Boy. Ooh. And then, of course, I also wanted to. Kim Powers was actually real close to get on the list too, because not only for directing Soul, but also writing One Night in Miami, like the actual play. So yeah, those are my honorable mentions.
Who was the co-director of Soul with him?
Pete Docter.
That's the guy I was thinking of for Soul.
And behind the greats of Pixar, I personally feel like Inside Out and a couple others too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Your number 1, Sabrina.
My number 1 is Steve McQueen, and I feel like all of our number 1s might be Steve McQueen.
Wait, is your number 1 Steve McQueen, RB3?
My number one is Steve McQueen.
My number one is Steve McQueen. We did not plan this, guys.
Hey, look what we doing.
To be fair, Sabrina, I'll let you go, but I feel like this is the only choice, the obvious choice. I really do feel like what he did with Small Axe is filmmaking in a whole, is directing in a whole. So go ahead, Sabrina.
Yeah, I mean, whichever way you put it, whether you consider Small Axe to be 5 separate films, which you consider it to be a film series, or you consider it to be like a mini series, regardless, these are some of the best films, shows, episodes, whatever, of the entire year. It's one of the best cinematic experiences, sheds light on racial bias in the UK, which is something that we never see on screen, but they have experiences the same way we do, and they're still fighting for that. So the fact that we get kind of this like voice champion throughout these films, I think is something really special. And he gives so much care to these stories. If you listen to him speak about it, he says like, oh, like something like Lovers Rock. I've been to parties like this. I was like a little kid. I was holding people's jackets. I was helping people out like that. And just so how near and dear to his heart this is, I just think is so special. I think technically they're incredible. Some of the shots are some of my favorites of the entire year. It's just like, I don't think we can speak on it enough how important and incredible this was. And I kind of just figured that it was going to be all of our number ones because like you said, this is the choice for best director.
Yeah. RB3.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree, and I think what made him feel, what made this feel very, very good to me is that the very, very. Sorry, let me start that over. I'm adding all that out. What made Steve McQueen my best director of 2020 is that all these films like were about historical things, but they all felt like very personal, right? They all felt like they're coming from a place of telling personal history of relaying a personal culture that hadn't been highlighted before. And, you know, when I think of the films individually, like Mangrove, still remains one of my favorite movies of the entire year. Again, I love courtroom dramas and I love, you know, highlighting stories that I probably wouldn't have known nothing about. And that's definitely an example of one of them. And, you know, especially when it comes out directly, and I hate to keep saying it, but it comes out directly close to something like Trial of Chicago 7, and you see what a courtroom movie looks like from like a, you know, kind of like a writer's perspective, like from Aaron Sorkin, versus what it looks like from a director's perspective, like Steve McQueen. And there's just a difference, you know, and I could tell that difference and I personally love it. And then you look at something like Lovers Rock and this mixture of music and culture and just the vibe, you know, it's rare when a film could just capture a vibe, but that's definitely what it does. And I think it's just a really, really rewatchable entire thing. And just honestly, the entire Small Axe cinematic universe in general, and I call it cinematic universe jokingly, but it actually does tell individual stories, but still tell a collective whole as well. And I think that's really, really spectacular. And also, not to mention, Steve McQueen also is getting top tier performances out of John Boyega from Red, White, and Blue. I think probably John Boyega's best performance I personally seen him in. Excuse me. And also Letitia Wright and Mangrove, Sean Parks, and even the younger actors like the young man we saw in Education and also Alex Wendell. Also really, really good, strong acting all across the board. So I really, really enjoyed everything about these films.
Yeah, it's obviously, when it comes to filmmaking, Steve McQueen really does dominate in this series. And like you said, man, they're all different, but they all communicate a similar message, a similar theme. But I really like the energy of each and every one of these films. And by energy, I really do feel like each character exemplifies a different personality, a different style, a different background. Obviously, when we start out with Mangrove, we get to see obviously the brutalness of what they're confronting, but also the beauty of their culture and their people and their food and their music, their power, their grace, their intelligence of being able to defend themselves in court inside the British system. To me, is something that's also beautiful as well. And I think Steve McQueen captures that so well in Mangrove. Going to Lovers Rock and capturing the beauty of the music there and the atmosphere that's inside there, I think is a really powerful thing you can do through a camera. And I think he does that so well. And obviously throughout the entire series, when we get to Alex Wheatle and we get to even more really tough scenes. I think he nails it really well. I focused on the scene in Alex Wheatle when it comes to the slow tracking shot, the slow dolly up when he's tied up and they tie him up in school to show kind of the brutalness of what's going on and how that kind of puts him into a really negative mental state. Each and every one of these films does something different, and it does it so well, and yet it still has one central core that is driving it, which to me is just so powerful. It really is like filmmaking 101, man. Like, you can teach these in school, in film school. It really is that good.
Yeah, I feel like it's completely underrated that people just aren't taking the time to check this out, but it's so easily available on Amazon Prime. And yes, it's 5 films. Most of them are like an hour, so you can genuinely knock these out just like over a few days. Check them out. I think it's something really impactful and important. And like we said, like, each of these are so unique and special to themselves. So even if one interests you more than another, check it out. Like RB3 said, Mangrove is one of the best movies of this entire year. You cannot miss out on something like that. Lovers Rock is a whole experience, like visually, audibly, everything. I just think Steve McQueen did such an incredible job with this. And yeah.
RB3, any final thoughts?
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm really, really glad that, you know, we've been fortunate to highlight like these films and this entire series like on this channel. And I'm glad we're highlighting Steve McQueen as a director here, because I really do feel like these are some bold things that he's doing on television, and, you know, shooting on 35 millimeter film for a lot of these episodes, making it feel, you know, having these big period pieces. And, you know, there's scenes in like Mangrove and Alex Wheatle, they're like big crowd scenes, I'm sure weren't cheap. So shout out to BBC One and shout out to Amazon for also allowing that to be made too. But I really enjoy telling these stories of, you know, police brutality or dysfunction in the education system, or you know, or discrimination, or just vibing, all that evokes like these universal Black truths even from across the pond. So I really, really dig it all across the board.
Either way, guys, that has been our top 5 directors of 2020. I am still blown away that we all agreed on our number 1. That's so cool. We used to do this back in the day when we used to make our, like, what's our best actor or best director of the year, and we would all try to come to a consensus. And as different as we all are, we all agree that Steve McQueen took over 2020 with the Small Axe series. We really do feel like that's the best thing we've seen all year when it comes to direction. So that is our list, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Sabrina, where can everyone find you?
You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at SabrinaXMonica, and then also on Twitter at SabrinaOnFilm.
RB3.
You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Director RB3.
I'm at Squad Leader Race, guys, and make sure to follow us at First Cut TMO right here for more film coverage. Subscribe if you haven't done so already. Like this video, leave a comment, let us know what your top 5 directors are in the comments down below. Also follow us on Patreon if you want to give us some love over on Patreon. We have different tiers for you to jump into. That's a quick little way for you to get involved in the First Cut community as well. Either way, guys, for the Meeting Up podcast and for the First Cut crew, we're peacing out. Peace.